Again, welcome everyone. Welcome to all of you who are joining us live. Welcome to all of you who are watching this video after the fact. My name is Matt Reichert, and I'm honored to be the director of the Center for Learning, a division at OCP focused exclusively on professional ministerial development for pastoral ministers. We're really happy to be able to offer these free webinars and glad that you've been able to join us on this free webinar for today. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Scott Crandall. Many of you might have heard Scott before at conferences or other workshops, or you might be familiar with his compositions or his arrangement. Certainly, you're familiar with the fruit of his work at OCP, working in music development and editorial processes at OCP, and we're awfully glad to have you here with us, Scott.
Oh, my pleasure.
Again, we're going to get things kicked off here in just a moment. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. If you're watching this after the fact and you have questions, you can reach us at learning@ocp.org. You can send us that question by email, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Scott, before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know what you would like us to know about you and your work?
Yes, well, like many of you, I've been involved in church music for most of my life, and I started playing keyboard in the contemporary band in a Lutheran church I went to when I was a teenager. Um, and it kind of grew from there, and I was mainly a keyboard player, and then it was in my 20s. Mid 20s, and I started taking lessons from this woman who's a great voice teacher, and we took a few lessons, and she said, you're a good musician, you could be a lot better singer than you are if if you really pay attention to what I'm trying to tell you here. And so it was because of her that I finally really kind of discovered the real joy of singing.
Yeah.
And so ever since from the mid 20s, I've really been on kind of on a path to improve my singing. Now, some of the basic framework of who I am, where I've been, is that I've been an OCP for kind of about 16 years in general. I did take a stint away and did some other things, some singing, but been an OCP. I've been at my parish, St. John the Baptist Episcopal Church, for 25 years, and I direct the choir there, play piano, some organ, and so that's where I've really developed my techniques, working with this choir for 25 years, and I also sing outside of that. I sing with the Portland Opera. In fact, I'm in the upcoming production of The Marriage of Figaro, and I sing various gigs around town. I also sing jazz and rock, and so I sing some variety of styles. But I'm a real passionate advocate for people to improve their voice over their lifetime. And so my favorite example is a guy named Bill Gleason, who was in my choir. Unfortunately, Bill passed away at age 85 about 6 years ago, but I'll never forget because he was a great singer all the way until he passed away. He was a good singer, and he took it really seriously. And he's kind of my inspiration when I talk to when other people are dealing with aging and singing. I always remember Bill. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a little taste of who I am, and looking forward to talking with people today about singing and improving, no matter our age.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks, Scott. And thanks for that summary. Thanks for all the things that you do both within and outside OCP. And I think, all of us who are leaders of choirs, or have been leaders of choirs or members of choirs, I think, we probably all have that Bill or someone in our life, right? Who's sort of that great example of someone who's pursuing or constantly improving their voice and their musicality and their service throughout their life. So today in our conversation, as you're watching at home or you're watching after the fact, let's call to mind whoever that Bill is for you. All of those who have supported us, who continue to support us, that we continue to minister with, those who have gone on before us. We'll keep them in mind during our conversation today. Before we get into our first question, again, I'm putting into the chat one more time the link to the handout for today. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the page underneath the description for today's webinar, you'll see download PDF handout. If you click on that, you'll be in business. I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see what this handout looks like. I know some of you are joining from your phone, or maybe aren't able to open up another window right now. So I want you to have a sense of what's there. So this PDF, again, free, download it, send it to friends, print it off, whatever you'd like to do. This tells you a little bit more about the Center for Learning and who we are, what our mission is in terms of these types of programming and resource that we're providing. And then we have a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to. One, this isn't ours. This is an adaptation of a different resource with some pointers for singers and for choir leaders working with aging voices. This is from a resource that's a collaboration between an organization in Ireland, actually, to help develop choirs of all kinds, community choirs, church choirs, called Sing Ireland, and an organization called Creative Aging International. It's a great resource. You can have a link there where you can find it. But this has, again, good tips. If you're a choir director looking for suggestions or words of encouragement or direction for your choir members who might have aging voices, here's a list. And then some good things for you to remember also as choir leaders. After that, Scott's provided us with a little bit of a reading list or recommended titles for us to take a look at, and we can talk about what those are and what we might find in those a little bit later in the conversation. We'll also be coming back to a checklist after this, but I put in, some of you might be familiar with the National Association of Teachers of Singing, or NATS. This is one article that they've published. If you're not familiar with NATS, at the end of this article, there's more information about who they are and membership and their resources. They're a great place to check out for more information about working with individual voices, ensembles, etc. But this article by Robert Irwin really is on voice pedagogy and specific suggestions for voice pedagogy. If this article is helpful, we have provided, or even if it's not helpful, I don't want to scroll too fast and make you motion sick here, but we've provided some reflection questions or discussion questions afterwards to help take what Robert has in his article and really think about, okay, what does that mean for you and your choir or your music ministry right now? What would the next steps be for you to be able to, address some of those practices that he talks about that you would like to pursue in your choir? So there's some reflection questions there for you. We have this list of 10 skills that Scott has provided us, along with a checklist that you could use individually or for an entire ensemble or a section, some way to be able to gauge progress and growth, not just for aging voices, but really for all voices. The types of vocal care, I think, spoiler alert, the types of vocal care that's good for all voices are good for aging voices and vice versa.
True.
So we'll talk about these skills, and I know, Scott, you'll want to say some things about that. And then finally, we've shown this before if you were in some of our other webinars, but a rehearsal agenda builder, as we're talking about the types of vocalises and warm-ups and reminders for vocal care or adjustment to score that you might need to do. There's a rehearsal agenda builder along with a sample so you can see what that might look like, okay? So way more from me than you needed, but I wanted to make sure you knew what was in that packet. So
Yeah, great packet. Yeah.
Scott, let's kick things off. Again, you mentioned you've been with your with the choir or the choral program in your church for 25 years, longer. You do a lot of work in other places. First of all, what's the landscape of your choir like? Again, nationally, we know that especially with church choirs, the average age of church choirs tends to be increasing. Right.
Right.
I would imagine that's probably the case in many of those who are with us today in our parish or our parish experience. Is that the experience you have with John the Baptist? Is your choir aging older? Is your choir average age staying about the same?
Yeah, I would say it definitely has gotten older, the average age over time. Yeah. Now, I do have new people coming in that are younger here and there.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I'd say, oh, the average age, well, it's hard to say because I have people who are in their 20s, but
Sure.
I have a good number of people probably. Well, my choir is about anywhere between 20 and 30 people.
Mhm.
So, uh, and I would say I probably, 2/3 of them are over 50.
Mhm.
Um, so, the majority are older, and a good number are in their 60s. I have a few
Mhm.
in their 70s. Um, so yeah, it's something that this is an issue that is, you know, it's gonna be an issue tonight at choir rehearsal, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, so your experience, again, is going to mirror the experience of a lot of us. So
yeah,
knowing that your choir has older voices in it and has, they started to trend aging. You have some 20s, but maybe not replacing in the same number. Um, tonight when you're at your choir rehearsal, how do you approach warm-ups? How do you approach vocal care when you're thinking about your rehearsals? How do you take into account the fact that you do have aging voices within your ensemble so that you're best helping them care and develop their instrument?
yeah. It's a great opening question because I think it can be helpful to have a general philosophy about how
Mhm.
you're working with these kinds of issues. Um, and I do kind of have a general philosophy about this, and that is that you know aging voices as people get older, it's almost like they the typical singer over the course of their lifetime who's not like a professional singer, someone who sings in choirs and loves it and enjoys it, a lot of times their vocal abilities don't really change much. They enter in at a certain time into the choir world and cantering or whatever, and doesn't change much, and so I like to approach the whole issue with my choir in terms of, okay, choir, we're all becoming better singers. Every time we get together, hopefully we're becoming better singers because I really want them to be thinking, it's almost like being on a track team or
Hmm.
some kind of sports team where it's like, okay, we are all getting better together. Now we don't have a scoreboard like a soccer team would have, telling us how well we're doing. Um, but in general, I really want to promote the idea that we are all getting better
Hmm.
together as singers. Now, the aging voices issue comes up because sometimes people have in their mind, oh, well, I'm getting older. I can't sing that note anymore. And it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm getting older, and older singers don't sing as well. So therefore, I'm not probably not going to sing as well.
Hmm.
And so I like to try to combat that a little bit and kind of make it clear that we got Bill Gleason. Remember, don't forget Bill. But approaching it with the idea that we are all getting better together.
Yeah.
That's how I approach the general philosophy. And then with warm-ups, what I like about that warm-up grid that you showed
Hmm.
briefly, the rehearsal
Hmm.
uh, grid, planning your rehearsal, is that it provides you a really great way to systematically help singers over time.
Yeah.
Because if you have a list of techniques and warm-ups that you think are important, well, and we're going to get to that, the one that I use here, but it's a lot to cover. You
Yeah.
only have what, an hour and a half of rehearsal or 2 hours, and you got all this music, and it's a lot to cover. So, but if you can have a systematic approach and you use like a rehearsal grid, you can write on there, okay, well, today we're going to work on this technique. And then at this next rehearsal, we're going to work on this technique. And you can divvy it up over time so you're not flooding everybody with how to become a better singer in all techniques every time we get together. It's more of a piecemeal approach where it's like this skill's going to get better, this skill's
Right.
going to get better over time, and over time we're all getting better together.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that you're starting philosophically, right? For a couple of reasons. I like the and encourage, again, our participants to think about that philosophy of we're getting better over time also jives with the we're we're we our voices are so personal, right? And as we get older, our voices will change, or the vocal quality will change. We just know that physiologically, we know that in so many ways. And and it doesn't make it any less our voice, right? And so to be able to sing
Right.
into it, I think of on the opposite end of the spectrum. When I was in college, I worked for a boys choir, really wonderful boys choir, and one of the best things that choir did is unlike other boys choirs, when a boy's voice would start to change, they had him continue singing through the change. Some boys
Yeah.
choirs, you're out when your soprano starts to break. And what they found just nationally is that that's your voice. You're not singing into your voice. You feel like you've lost something, right? So I
Right.
like that we're growing together because it's us, right? I also like that, you're focused on that skill development, right? You're focused on that thing that we can all do together. We can grow together, in a way that, choir is a lot about socialization, right? And a lot about finding community, and that's really important. And
Right.
of course, as we grow in those skills and we see how we're making progress regardless of where we are in our lives, I think that's so important and beautiful, and another way that we can minister to people.
Right.
um I'm going to put up your
Thank
list of
you.
skills, Scott, if you want to, because I think getting to that point of intentionally growing in our skills and getting better, this is such a helpful list that you've provided. So, participants, I'm going to
Yeah.
share. This is in your packet, this 10 skills for singers. So hopefully you can see the list of 10, but Scott, would you walk us through what this is, how you use it, how you think about these particular skills?
Yeah. You'll see in my piano here, I got this book. It's probably my favorite book on singing, although it's very difficult to find now.
Hmm.
But it's The Structure of Singing by Richard Miller. He was a vocal coach or vocal, professor at Oberlin for I don't know how long, forever. Um, but I've got a lot of from this book. There's other books that are mentioned, but the main thing that I got is I kind of went through and culled these 10 skills from this book, and he systematically goes through and talks about each one in great detail with scientific, with X-rays and science and everything. So it's a bit of a dense read, but the idea being that picture a balance beam. What do you call him? A gymnast, right?
Hmm.
On the balance beam. Well, your first day on the balance beam, never been on the balance beam before. What do you do? Well, first of all, you got to not fall off. You got to be able to stand on it without falling off. What else you got to do? Well, you got to be able to. I don't know if this is true or not, but I think it is true. I think you're supposed to look down toward the end of the beam, or where are your eyes focused? And what's your foot position? What's your foot? So all these individual little important things need to be you need to make some decisions and figure out, because what happens eventually is that all these individual skills become, and the word I love is coordinated. They're
Mm.
coordinated together so that when the balance beam gymnast gets up there and does their thing, they've spent enough time on all these different specific aspects of their craft that they start to gel in together, and they don't necessarily need to think about all these specifics anymore,
Mhm.
because they're creating this overall experience that is high quality because they've worked on all these areas. So this 10 skills for singers here is kind of like that. It's basically, these are the 10 skills that need to be identified individually and worked on individually, because then eventually over time they start melding into each other, and you don't necessarily, your overall level just goes up. The reason that I have and this is really meant to be more of a piece of paper that you have for yourself.
Mhm.
You could use it to judge someone else, or if they want you to, I suppose. But really, kind of the idea of, this is my journey, and I would bet money that there's hardly anyone on the planet, if anyone, who can circle the 10 on all of
Mm.
these skills. So the idea is that it's not as though we're getting to some point in the future where if we just arrive at that point, then we've arrived at the perfect
Yeah.
singing. It's not that. It's a constant journey, and the question you can ask yourself is how good am I on these different skills, right? that's the basic philosophy of a list like this. And
Yeah,
I have found I put this one page in the I pass out to the choir and they have it in there. I have found that just knowing the different skills and seeing them regularly listed, just that can help singers get better because they
sure.
start to think in terms of, oh, I'm having a problem with this. Oh, yeah, that's one of those skills. It's almost like your wisdom increases just by knowing what are we dealing with here in terms of
Right,
what do we have to work on.
right.
Um,
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
I'll say
and
for our participants, so we provided this this list of skills that Scott mentioned, and Scott, in a second, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us the just to make sure that we have alignment and coordination, to
yeah,
borrow the word, um, across the participants, to make sure we've got alignment and coordination on what you mean by these 10 skills. I'm going to ask you
right,
to give us a quick
sure,
rundown.
absolutely.
But for those of you who are looking at this page, wondering, well, how would I use this? What would this be for? Like Scott mentioned, you could use it in a variety of ways. I love the idea of having this list or having it posted in your choir room or something, so we're aware of what we're constantly working towards, right? Um,
Hmm.
but also, using this as a way to track that growth over time, or to track that particular need over time, to be able to, as a choir director or leader, to use this tool yourself for this choir and realize, okay, we're going to need to spend some time on breath management and range extension
Yeah,
over the next month or two. So now when I think ahead to what my repertoire is coming up, where are the opportunities in
exactly.
rehearsal or choosing repertoire
Using
to
your
be able to work on
repertoire.
that,
Yeah,
right? I mean, so
right.
this is, it's meant to be, we're trying to provide this tool to help you funnel and process as much as possible this vast array of possibilities of what you could be working on and how to work on it, to use this as a tool for yourself. So I just want to be clear, we're not suggesting this is not an audition instrument, right? This is not a can you stay in the choir or not instrument.
Yeah, right.
This is really meant to
Oh,
help
I only got a
you.
3. I can't be in the choir.
Right. This is really meant to help you be able to keep track of, what are all the dials on the dashboard, and how can that then help suggest a rehearsal practice or other intervention that
Yeah,
might
and
help.
I'll say one more little thing about this philosophy, and that is that, this is a webinar about aging voices. And I have found that one of the best ways to deal with aging voices is to not single them out or
Yeah.
try not to.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this in a total total approach like this, then when you're in choir rehearsal and you're doing warm-ups, uh, it's not an aging voice issue. It's a
Right.
we're all getting better together issue.
Yeah.
And it makes someone who has an aging voice, who might be feeling insecure or whatever, it makes them feel part of the group 100% because we're all working on the same thing.
Right.
So it's a nice way to deal with the aging
Yeah.
voice issue without making people feel self-conscious.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And frankly, um, all of our voices are aging, right? I mean, all of our voices are older
That's
today than they
true
were
every
yesterday,
day.
right? Yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
so again, I think it would be helpful just for level setting. And Scott and I were talking about this before the webinar started, that especially for musicians and choir directors, sometimes, we know all of this stuff, but it's helpful to hear someone else explain it, or that
Right.
tip or trick or approach that someone else has, because we can then beg, borrow, and steal it from one another. So even though, many of these things, if not maybe all of them, are familiar to those of you who are joining us, Scott, you want to take us through just real quick kind
Yeah.
of what this is, and maybe then, as you're using this with your choir, what are the kinds of things you're looking for?
Right. And to mention that these are kind of in a general order,
Mhm.
in terms of there is some philosophy as to why they're in this order, and I think that'll become clear as we go through it. So the first one, onset and release, and this is the idea that if you can start a tone correctly, well, that's a pretty good place to start. We gotta make sure our tones are starting correctly. And yeah, I can. How much time do we have here? Because we could go on forever on these, but I'll give just a brief. Should I go through each one just
Yeah,
a brief
I think, why don't you hit the
and some
first ones
examples?
as foundations real hard, and then we can just talk about the later ones more quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So onset and release. So this is this idea that how do you start a tone?
Mhm.
And a lot of times people don't even think about it. But, first of all, there's something on this there's something that should be added to this list because it should just be always done, and that is starting with a noble posture. And that's
Mhm.
how Richard Miller describes it as a noble posture, which I love that word because what we're doing is noble, and we need to feel
Mhm.
noble when we sing. So having that posture of, standing up, with your chest up a little bit, and you're proud, a little bit of pride, okay? That's important. We got to have our instrument in place. And that's not even on this list because it's just you
Right.
got to have good
Yeah.
posture. You got to feel noble when you're singing. It really helps. So, going on to number 1, onset and release. So, there's three ways to start a tone. You can start a tone. Now, this is without a consonant at the beginning of a sound, but the three ways are this. You can go ah, or ha with an H, or hard. The first one was a hard glottal ah, or H, ha. An imaginary H is kind of like a secret little weapon for starting a tone. Ah, an imaginary H. And so this is how you get the tone started. And it's a great way to do this. And then, of course, the other issue is accuracy of pitch at the
Mhm.
onset of your and there's all kinds of ways to work on this. And for all 10 of these, the basic approach that I use with the choir is, say, basically we do something super easy where you can do it, and then you just make it progressively more and more difficult for each of these until you break,
Mhm.
for lack
Mhm.
of a better word, until you realize, oh, that's where I'm at. I can't really go much more than that. So an example of this first one with the choir is, the easiest way is just to do this. Choose a vowel, maybe ooh, 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 ooh. Now that's with an imaginary H. But then now that's pretty easy. But you start jumping around a little bit and see if you can hit those pitches right from the beginning of the sound. Can you hit that pitch right on? Ooh, 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 ooh. And I'm going to do this until I break. Because I'll break, because I'm no one's a 10 on these issues. Here's another one. Ooh, 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 ooh. E, 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 e. That's pretty good, but there's a couple of those pitches that aren't perfect. Then you just make it more difficult. E, 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 or e, 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 e. Not bad, not bad. But you can tell even a couple of those, the pitch isn't perfect, right? You keep and you increase the speed. When you increase the speed, that's where you start breaking.
Yeah.
And you keep and you can jump around. You can make up warm-ups. I always making up warm-ups. Um, but this is an example. So that's the first one. And what I'll do is I'll just have the basses do it, and then everyone else can listen. Just the altos, everyone can listen, and then we'll all do it together. And Matt and I were talking about this earlier. One thing that's really helpful I find with singers is that when you have to sing solo, all of a sudden the stakes are higher, right? And you sit up and you do everything you're supposed to do. Well, we should try to always do what we're supposed to do. But the point is a lot of times choir singers, they don't want to sing by themselves, or they don't feel comfortable, they're self-conscious, and that's fine. So a lot of times with these warm-ups and stuff, I'll say, okay, altos, let's do it, or the first row of the altos, try it. And as you gain comfort in this area, you can say, okay, you four, you do it. You three, you do it. You two, do it together. And people will go along with it. You got to be sensitive. You don't want to put people on the spot. But when you're singing with two other people, you're much more confident than if you're doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
So that's another little thing. So onset and release, that's a big one, and we work on that. And another thing, you can have people push in the little flap on your ear. when you're singing, push in one, and you can hear yourself a lot better. Because a lot of times when you're in a choir, you can't hear yourself very well. There's so many people, but if you push in one ear, you can all of a sudden you can hear yourself very well. And he's like, "Am I getting those pitches right on or not?" Let's go to number two real quick, if that's okay,
Yeah,
Matt.
please go ahead. Yeah, please.
Number two, here's our my favorite thing to do with number two, and it's actually works well because it provides a nice relaxation. Kind of everyone gets relaxed and it sets a nice mood. Um, and it's this. Basically, I'll have the choir. Okay, choir, we're going to breathe in for a certain number of counts. We're going to sustain or hold that for a certain number of counts, and then we're going to breathe out for a certain number of counts. So, for instance, like this. Let's all do it together. In fact, seriously, right now, we'll do it. Here we go. Ready? So, when I start, I'm gonna say, okay, we're gonna breathe in for 10. Well, let's do 10 counts. We're gonna breathe in for 10. We're gonna hold for 10. We're gonna breathe out for 10. So I say, okay, everybody breathe out, and here we go. Breathing in. Breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now sustain that, hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then if no one's fainted, then I'll tell the choir, oh, no one's fainted. I guess we have to make it harder. So anyway, that's a nice exercise. And what you do is just increase the number. Okay, let's do 11. We do 11. We do 12. We do 13. And some people moan and groan, but it's really fun. They have fun time doing it. So that really teaches a great skill to breathe in consciously and fully, and to be able to sustain it over periods of time, and then to breathe out in a controlled manner. Great exercise. And you can do it. You can have them breathe out in an S, or however you want to do that. But that's breath management. That's one thing you can do. There's all kinds of things you can do, but that's one. Agility. Obviously, we know what that is, right? And that's really common, of course, like in a lot of classical singing, where you have like a lot of 16th notes, or that kind of stuff. But it's also important for anybody who's singing popular music, because there's a lot of melismatic passages that are in popular music that you can either add, or like, hey, hey, hey,
That's the communion anthem you're singing this song.
bring us that bread. um, but agility can be fun, and again, you just make it harder and harder. So you choose a phrase, like uh, uh, hey, 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 and you can make it longer. Hey, hey, and you're going faster and faster. And you can use just different vowels. It's important to use different vowels. Also important with warm-ups, don't forget dynamics. It's okay in warm-ups to do dynamics. Okay, let's do that again. Let's do it softly. Hey, hey, very loud. Hey, something like that. And you can, and like Matt said earlier, it's great idea to use your repertoire. Just flip through your music, and you can choose vocal exercises right from your repertoire, and just grab a phrase, choose a vowel, boom. And they're learning the music at the same time.
Right.
um, so yeah, agility is really, well, these are all important, but and then vowels, and this is super important with a choir, because the idea from a solo singing standpoint on vowels is that you have your vowels locked in. Your uh, American vowels, e a o u, e a o u, and the position of your tongue and the mouth, and you're locked in. You intensely know each vowel.
Mhm.
And it's super important to choir because if we all sing the very similar vowels, then it's more in tune. It's actually louder. It's easier to hear. So we spend a lot of time on vowels, and I'll even sing have them sing vowels incorrectly so that they can really feel what it's like when they sing them correctly. And one of the ones is like the oo vowel. A lot of times singers will sing the oo vowel without rounding their lips. They're kind of like, the moon is beautiful or whatever. The moon. But I'm like, okay, this it's not the vowel. The vowel is not the moon. It's the moon is bright. Where's my tongue? Bright on the bottom of my mouth. Okay, you gotta lock in all these vowels so you really know consciously how is the vowel being formed, and if we all do it together, it just has this nice blend. So
I want to ask you two questions. This is so helpful, Scott, and I'm already thinking of all of the things that I wish to do and all of the ways that I failed the various choirs that I've done before. But I want to ask you, in interest of time, I want to ask you about two of
yes,
these in
right,
particular.
yes.
And for again, participants, you got this list. I know you mentioned the book title and it's hard to get, but I did add it into the chat.
Oh, good.
Also, um, but if you could say, knowing all 10 of these are critical for all of our voices, no matter what age they're at, especially as we think of aging voices, meaning, you know, 50, 60 plus, 60 plus, 70 plus, right?
Mhm.
Can you say something about both range extension, number 8, and then
Yeah.
vibrancy and vibrato, number 10?
Yes, very good. Range extension, I really think it's important for all singers to be able to just say right off the top of their head, what is your high note and what's your low note?
Hmm.
You feel comfortable singing. And if we know that, it can be very helpful because my firm belief is that if you want to extend your range, it's very well, all these are like exercise, but it's very much like exercise. You haven't exercised in a month, you go out and exercise, you're hurting. You're not up to par, right? But the more you exercise, the easier it gets, and the more you're able to do. Range extension is right up there with this. To extend your range, you really need to be singing higher than your high note on a regular basis. So, and this can be a great thing for aging voices because it can give you confidence. It's like because if you really do it on a regular basis, you are able to keep your range
Mhm.
extended quite high. I can tell you right now, my high note is a high C. Sometimes I can do a C sharp, but I don't count it because it's not that great sometimes. But you and you just keep going up and up and up until you can't get up any higher. Okay, now I'll do my high C. I can barely do it sitting down, but there's a high note. I know my high note's a C, and I got to keep on that C. I got to be singing it on a regular basis for it to work. So that's there's no easy way around range extensions that you just got to do it on a regular basis, and you can do it in the car. You don't have to do it full voice. You can do it half voice. You got to give your voice the regular experience of singing higher than you normally can in order for it to continue to be able to be flexible up there. The other thing is vibrancy and vibrato that you mentioned. Yeah, um, you know, uh, the vibrato one is fun to do with the choir because a lot of choirs kind of pass over this as a skill, but it can be really fun. Singing certain phrases from your repertoire. You choose a phrase and you say, "Okay, or even just starting with a note." But okay, everybody, let's sing. Let's sing this straight tone. And we're going to sing it straight tone, and we're going to put a vibrato in on the end, and it's going to be a very slight vibrato. Okay, everybody, La. Okay, now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to start with a slight vibrato and we're going to go down to straight tone. La. And now we're going to start with a wide vibrato and go to a straight tone. And I want it wide, folks, like you know, like a character, like a cartoon. And then we're going to go back and forth. We're going to start straight. We're going to go to a big wobbly tone, and we're going to come back to a straight tone. And this can be really fun for a choir. They can really have fun with this. And you can do it in different ranges, and
I
different
love
volume levels.
I love both the range extension and what you're talking about with vibrato and the way you're referring to them, because again, as we're thinking about aging voices, I think sometimes the psychology of it as singers or as leaders of choir can be either uh, erring too much on one side of this is something that's happening to me, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to this is a natural thing and I'm growing into my voice, or it's something I can completely control, right? Which really what you're talking about in the middle is this is just a human condition of all of our voices aging, changing, and there are ways that we engage with it, right? So even the what you just talked about with vibrancy and vibrato is because sometimes I think we vibrato as an issue, that's a whole other webinar, right? But even
Yes.
that little warm up, that activity causes me to think about it differently and be aware of it differently and engage with it differently, instead of just the way that oftentimes I think we deal with vibrato or don't deal with it in trying to treat a problem, as opposed to engaging with the concept as I engage with my voice and understand it more fully, which I think is really, it's just a powerful way to add to that, again, philosophical approach that you laid out for us at the beginning, you know?
Well said. And in choirs, we sing a lot of held notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the question is, what are you doing? What's your strategy for those held notes? Are we just not going to talk about vibrato, and whatever happens, happens? Well,
Yeah.
if everything sounds fine, then maybe.
Yeah.
Or can we talk about it?
Right.
On this particular piece, let's have very little vibrato. And I don't do that a lot. Usually I let
Right.
the voices be more natural, but I do want people to be making some kind of choice.
Yeah.
You know,
Quick question for you, Scott. Thinking about these last two, especially range extension, Mary asks, when you're working on, especially in warm-ups or you're working with vocal technique on range extension, especially with aging voices, are you focused primarily on natural voice? Are you also doing range extension with falsetto? How's falsetto coming into your work here also?
yeah, well, that's an interesting issue because men and women's voices are a little bit different here,
Yeah.
and so I like to explore the entire range of the voice. And one thing I didn't even mention, but we regularly do sirens, where through a
Sure.
siren, you sing and the problem with sirens is sometimes people don't go as high and as low as they really ought to. When we do a siren, we go as low as you can go and as high as you can go, and we do it slowly too sometimes, like yeah, it's slow, right? Because what that does is it it puts you in touch with every single part of your voice.
Yeah.
you know, every single part. If you do it slow, and you can hear where are the cracks, where are the things that don't
Mhm.
feel so comfortable. And you mentioned falsetto. When am I flying into falsetto, and what's the transition like into falsetto? And can I bring my chest voice up? Should I bring it up, or should I bring my falsetto down? And so there's all these questions, but being aware of every single part of your voice and how it slides in and out of each other, so
Yeah.
that you get a clear sound. That's how I would say you deal with it, and then you can make a choice. You make some choices as to in terms of, okay, am I going to sing this in falsetto, this area? And in a choir, sometimes that'll work, especially for men's voices if they're getting up higher. Sometimes that's just what you have to do. But making a choice and being aware of your strength in that area of your voice
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
I'm going to isolate the audio of you doing that siren. That's going to be my new ringtone.
I know
If
it's really
anybody else
annoying.
would like the Scott Crandall siren ringtone, you can send me an
Well,
email.
I have to say let me say one thing really. How much
Yeah,
time?
please.
Oh, one thing. Okay, the resonance number 5 skill, that's interesting because the whole thing about that is that, we want to sing with resonant voices, right? And how do you do that? Well, we start by doing the most resonant tone that we can, and that is nya 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 nya. Okay, that's the most resonant tone any of us is ever going to make. And if you start with that and you have a sense of that, um, I'm just bringing this up because it's so obnoxious sounding, but yeah, 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 and then you plug you plug your nose. Yeah, 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 yeah. Uh-oh. What you really want with in terms of resonance is you be able to sing with your nose plugged. You don't hear a difference. But by doing the nya nya nyas, it at least gives you the sense of what is the most resonant way my voice can sound. So
Mm.
what I do is we'll do nya nya nya, then we'll start backing it off until there's no difference and you can hear the resonance. So, yeah, 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 yeah. Big difference when I plug my nose. Now watch. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Not bad, right? So it helps you to get some resonance going and understand what is resonance, because you can also keep going to breathiness.
Right.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range, and we want to
And
be in the
that
busy.
gave me another ringtone opportunity for you too. Um, so speaking of range, falsetto, again, I like the image you gave too, or the comparison you gave of, you know, knowing what your range is, note to note, and then thinking, if you like physical activity, if I don't run at all, could I run a mile all of a sudden? Sure, but I'm going to feel it for 3 weeks, right? If I can't sing a high C and I shoot for a high C and I'm not working and extending my range, it's going to be a problem, right? So I like that comparison. So let's transition that to repertoire, right? As we're thinking about repertoire, especially for those of us who have choirs where maybe it's not just several members are aging or have aging voices, but really the substantive number of choir members. Maybe it's a funeral choir, maybe it's our adult choir, our older. Um, how do you take that into consideration when choosing repertoire? We certainly know we can rehearse the repertoire we have in ways that set us up for success. But what recommendations do you have for us in choosing the repertoire to begin with?
Yeah. This is an interesting question because what I tend to do, my basic approach is it's good to push a choir.
Mhm.
Basically, I think of repertoire in terms of, is this piece going to push them?
Mm.
Are they just going to simply love it? Or is it somewhere in the middle where they're going to like it, but it's going to take, and 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 I will say that one of the advantages of buying music from a music publisher like OCP or whoever you buy music from is that there has been some consideration already in terms
Mm.
of the ranges of voices. That can be a good thing. But in terms of how do you address the situation with a piece that perhaps has too high of a tessitura or range for certain choir members, and how do you make sure you're choosing repertoire that works? Well, one of the keys is tessitura versus range. Because if the range of the part is from C to E, like a tenor part, C to E, up a tenth, um, that's fine. But if it's always up there at the C, at the B and the C and the D, if it's hanging up there too long, oof,
Right.
that's tough. So I tend, because I feel like the range issue is usually taken care of by an editor if you're using a published piece of music. The range is probably okay, but the tessitura can be difficult. And so if a piece has constantly too high or constantly too low, that's where the real issue comes. I rarely see a piece my tenors that where the tenors go above a G. Sometimes, but if they're always hanging up there,
Yeah,
and so when I'm looking at repertoire, that's one of the things I look at.
yeah,
If the sopranos are hanging up there, on
right.
G's and F's, and you know, so I would say tessitura is usually the most important
And I like
aspect.
too, I mean, I like too what, what you were sharing before. And again, that list of the 10 skills is in that resource packet that you can download. So especially if you're watching this after the fact on our website in the video library, you can access the handout that way. Um, that
Yeah,
these skills help us, I mean, by focusing on the skills, by identifying the skills that are necessary, by really keeping ourselves well conditioned, by coordinating these skills, that's one consideration. What are we primed for, right? And also at the heart of repertoire selection too is knowing your choir, right? I like your suggestion of singers should know what their high note is and their low note. um Choir directors and leaders should know that too, right? And again, it's that in the
right.
middle. Don't get stuck there, because we can develop it, but you also have to know, so you're not just picking something willy-nilly, right? and
Yeah,
and then and then when boy, Christ the King, we're going to be singing this anthem, and it's way up there. We're going to start focusing on laying the tracks for that skill development and that range extension rehearsal tonight, right? Or whatever
yes,
that might
right.
be, I
Yeah,
mean, if you can do couch to 5K, but maybe not in 10 days. Maybe you need 6 weeks, right? So let's take the
right.
6 weeks, so I mean, in all of this too, I encourage folks, on a pastoral side of things, do you go for a lower key, or do you arrange things differently by moving someone who's having a harder time with that higher range to
Well,
a different
that
part?
that is I should mention that. I have a guy in my choir right now, and he's aging, and he's been a tenor his whole life, and it's more difficult for him now.
Yeah,
And what we came to with him, and he feels comfortable with this, is that he sits he sits in the back row between the tenors and the basses. He's one of the people in the middle, and he will switch back and forth
sure.
depending on the piece. And and I support him in that because it makes him feel confident that he can
Yeah,
still sing. And I really want him to continue working on his range, but
right.
practically speaking, for him, this is a good opportunity, a
Yeah,
a good way to deal with it. And I think
yeah,
I'm relatively flexible with that whole thing. Like if I have an alto who this year said, you know what, I I really want to sing tenor. And 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 we did it. We're doing it. We're
yeah,
doing it. And she's still working on her voice, but
right.
she feels more confident. So I'm relatively flexible in that
Yeah,
area. Um, but
yeah,
I don't
I
want
love
people to
that.
use it as a crutch.
Right, right. Well, and also, I mean, there might be a time when again, it's the well, I think the flexibility is a great musical choice, is a great pastoral choice, right? And there might be times that it's necessary to find, and this is one of the things I appreciate about OCP, and I know some people like the way the OCP website works, some people don't like the way the OCP website works, but one of the things I like about it is that you can go through and you can find, is there an SAB arrangement of this, or is it just SATB? Like, what are the options? Is there a different, maybe a lower key option is the right way to go. But I think what I'm hearing and what you're
Yeah.
saying, Scott, and I'm so appreciative of the challenge, is we have other tools and skill development at our disposal that we don't need to assume aging voice, let me find the lower key. Maybe,
Yes, right.
but we don't have to. Or we don't have to just do that. We don't have to just hit the transpose button. Maybe.
Yeah.
But we have some other opportunities, and we have some other tactics available to us in our care for our choir.
And you mentioned something that we haven't talked a lot about, but the whole pastoral part of this whole thing is
Yeah,
really important. I mean, yeah, these 10 skills, it looks really technical and blah blah blah, but creating an environment in which
right,
we are all getting better together and we're playing with our voices. We're
right.
playing with them. It's like a game. You can
Yeah,
make it more like a game, and then it becomes fun.
yeah.
So,
Well, and on that note, I mean, we do have a couple minutes left. I want to go back to one other thing that we have in our packet, and again, you can find this on our website. This is again this thing that I mentioned at the beginning from Sing Ireland and Creative Aging International. Some you want to challenge your choir, and help your choir understand their own particular voice development, etc. I think these first six are really great. Your choir members aren't going to know unless you talk about it, unless you explore it. Even your example of resonance, Scott, I think is great. And how would we know what resonance is if we don't explore it, if we don't explain it, and if we're not always
mhm.
teaching, right? Sometimes we just get down to work plunking out the notes. But here we have a real opportunity to form and develop and grow. So helping your singers know, practicing and singing a little, but often sing throughout the day, right?
Yes, I
Hydrate
love
like a
that. I
fish. I
love that.
love that one. Be good to your voice and it'll repay you. Keep singing and stay positive. All of these are not only physiological, they're also philosophical and attitudinal ways to keep attuned. That's
Yes.
good for anyone, but especially your singers, because like you mentioned, so many singers, especially adult singers, find a real home and community and sense of common purpose within our choirs. And so this helps unlock that and helps extend that, which I think is great. And then, some other things, and we won't read through all these. You can find this in the packet on page 2. But you need to know your choir. You need to know your choir members regardless of ages. But what can they sing? What are they comfortable with? Where are they at? How do we help them grow? And knowing it's about respect. Again, if you have a choir that's older, don't just hit the transpose button. Work with
Right.
them, right? Work with them.
Yeah.
If you have a choir that's older, don't just assume what they can or can't sing, or what they will or won't do, or what their challenges are or are not.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that type of dignity and respect is super important, and that relational ask and listen and include and extend, and making sure everyone knows as your voice ages, just like mine is, just like yours is watching, that we sing, it's not that we're just losing something, we're singing into something, we're evolving into something, and that there's a space in
Mm.
this choir or music ministry for you to evolve in that and be here making music and ministering along with us. I think is a really important message for all choir members to know, regardless of their ages.
And that
um,
includes us too.
and
I
that
love what
includes us
you're
too.
saying. I love what you're saying. And
That
you know,
absolutely includes us too.
the stuff that I say to my choir has way more impact if I'm also saying it to myself. And
Correct.
so it creates this nice thing that we're all playing and having fun together,
Yeah.
becoming better singers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can have 14 more conversations like this because we just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
For those of you who are with us live or watching after the fact, keep in mind that we have related topics: recruiting new choir members, planning and leading effective rehearsals, all for free in our webinar library on our website, learnwithocp.org. You can find them there, watch them, share them, download the handouts. If there are other topics like this or other specific topics, things that you'd like to see, this is what we're here for. This is one of the many ways that we can help support you and your communities and your ministry. So please let us know if these are useful. If they're not useful, let us know, and let us know why, please, and what would be useful. We're here to help you minister more confidently and effectively. Thanks to you, Scott, for being here and all of the wisdom that you shared and all that you do for OCP and all the other places you serve. And thanks to all of you who are watching this for everything you do for your community, for your choir members, for your assembly, for those who are at your church on Sunday, those who aren't. What you do matters, and we're so happy and proud to be able to support you in your
My
critical
ple
and life-changing work. So
Thank you so much, Matt. My pleasure to be here. We're all getting better together.
that's right. Yeah. Thanks, Scott, and thanks everyone. Have a wonderful week. If you have choir rehearsal tonight, put some of this into practice and let us know how we can help. God bless. Thanks you all.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.